Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Milligan, and we are proudly presented by SPI Logistics. And we've got another great interview for y'all today because we are live at Manifest, the Future of Supply Chain and Logistics. And we've got Barry Conlon. He is the CEO of Overhaul. Overhaul has been a guest on the show previously, and I stalk y'all's YouTube because I think your YouTube is so great to be able to take that peek into cybercrime, not just cybercrime, but freight and freight fraud and how cargo crime is evolving through the years. And it's kind of always existed, right?
Well, I've been in this industry now for over 30 years, so yeah, I've been doing this for quite some time, but the level of sophistication and just the overall volume of attacks that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, nobody's ever seen anything close to this level in the last 24 months, 36 months. It's just been crazy, insanely active, and for good reason. It's just such a profitable enterprise for criminal networks. The return on investment is extremely good. Their risk ratio, if you're a criminal, there's two things you look at: return and risk, right? So if it's like a swing, if one sees the other and you're seeing your risk is disappearing because basically a property crime is not really seen as that important, particularly by law enforcement. So there's, in most cases, it just cross a jurisdiction that could be a mile away. You're not going to see any law enforcement response. So it's being left up to the shippers to really deal with this problem, but the levels are unprecedented at the moment, and I've just never seen anything like it. So that's going to continue because there's no criminal network in the world that in their current state are making vast amounts of money and not sharing any downside are going to move away from that crime anytime soon. If anything, we're seeing lots of different actors getting involved.
Now, you mentioned over 24 months. What has happened over 24 months for this dramatic uptick in freight fraud?
What normally happens with criminal enterprises, like COVID was the defining factor, right? Now, and that's like what? We're actually, I think, near the anniversary of 6 years when it just, everything happened.
Right, in the world, they call it BC and AC now.
That was the event that really shifted everything from the criminal network. People just started to buy more online. They got used to receiving things, even like pharmaceuticals, maybe even ingestibles are given to their children on the doorstep. It looked legit. The packaging looks good. It arrived maybe in a legit vehicle that you recognize the driver. So you're not going to question that anymore. You're just going to accept it and you want more of it. You're not going away from that convenience factor. Criminals have taken massive advantage of that. Their biggest challenge previously was getting the stolen goods back into the supply chain. We call it the shift from black to gray market. And what that really means is that, in most cases, it was difficult to sell a stolen product. Like you'd see things on warehouse.com or some other sites where still in its factory packing. Law enforcement would call that a clue. It's probably stolen. Right? But now, still in its factory packing, nobody even bats an eyelid. They don't even look at it anymore. You're just going to order it because it's in short supply and you need it. And criminals really are very focused on that. They know what's in short supply, so they know to get a greater return on that. They could sell it higher. It used to be 5-10 cents on the dollar back when I first started here. That was 25 years ago in the States, and now it's upwards of 80 to 100%. And in some cases, when it's a really short product that's in short supply, they'll get above 100% return. So that kind of massive generation of profit is just driving more and more what were kind of legal entities into actually conducting crime. And we're seeing that now, particularly in supply chain. Legitimate carriers, drivers. I'd say 20 years ago, you never saw driver involvement, only in Mexico. But now here, it's invasive. It's happening so often now. And they're taking advantage of the fact that there's such a fragmented supply chain as it relates to identity and who you are. People are taking shortcuts because they want to move fast. And, there isn't adequate checks at pickup points now to actually prevent these people just literally driving away with millions of dollars. And that's happening every day. We're seeing, I can't even go into just how many reported thefts we're dealing with every day. It used to be like a couple a month. Now it's like dozens a day.
Wow.
And they're only the ones we're being told about. And for every reported theft, 7 go unreported.
Because the customer doesn't want to let
anyone know. They don't want
know.
the bad publicity. They definitely don't want their competitors to know that there's a shortage of product in this area because I've just lost Like I received a report there a couple of days ago, and one of our biggest growth vectors in Overhaul has been AI infrastructure. It's out of, like you can't make these things fast enough. Like, and we know the big companies that are building these data centers, and so criminals know that, and they're targeting them. I heard of one hit mid last week that was $20 million, full truckload theft, and a $10 million theft 2 days later against not the same company but the same industry, and that was a fictitious pickup.
So is it servers that they're targeting? Is
Server
it
racks.
Materials?
AI server racks.
Wow.
They are the hottest item out there at the moment, and it's not just for the traditional illegitimate purposes of reselling them back into the industry. We have intelligence that there are some state actors involved too.
Wow.
Yeah, so there are restrictions around where these can be sold, what jurisdictions they can go to. Our control centers are watching shipments that are moving in the direction they shouldn't be going in, heading to jurisdictions that are banned under legislation like the CHIPS Act. And that's helping some of our customers actually notify these third parties that they're dealing with that we're sending inspection teams in, and then you see them coming back to where they should have gone. And that's just a day-to-day activity with us now. We're AI servers are just the hottest item out there at the moment.
Are there any, outside of AI data servers, are there any other products that folks are targeting? I mean, I've heard pistachios, energy drinks, and those things are hard to track because they get consumed versus electronics that, are a little bit more trackable.
Electronics are not easy to track either.
Oh, they're not?
You steal an FTL of, say, chips, whatever. There's no individual marking on that.
Really?
Like if you had $2 million of stolen, AI infrastructure chips or whatever, like from a NVIDIA or something like that, no law enforcement officer who stops you and says, open the trunk, let me see what you have in there. Oh, look, you've got a lot of these things, and if he knew the value was multi-million dollars, he can't prove it's stolen. There's no report of that, missing out there. There's no actual follow-up to see what's going on. So you're dealing with that kind of challenge on a day-to-day basis that, this is just the silent crime, that these guys are flying below the radar, and they are just making money like there's just no end to it, and they're talking about it, and that's dragging more and more criminal networks in because it's so lucrative. And, the downside is, even if you're caught and somebody did actually have a product, like maybe a cell phone, you can prove it was taken illegally, they're out later on that day because it's a property crime.
So a shipper, a customer, they obviously don't want their freight stolen. And so they know that they need some kind of a solution. So where does Overhaul come in? How do they know what to look for, first of all? Because they probably contacted the authorities, and the authorities, from what you're saying, are not going to offer any kind of help because it's probably out of their jurisdiction, or maybe they see it as petty crime. So what is a shipper to do? And then how does Overhaul come in and overhaul, for lack of a better phrase?
It's a really good, your thought process there around that question is really interesting because, it is becoming the shipper's problem. You cannot rely on law enforcement response. It's a crime they don't understand. They don't have the resources to fight. It's already gone out of their jurisdiction, or at least they would say, contact your insurance company. Right? So industry has to respond, and that's why my company is so successful. We're called in by shippers mostly. I'd say about 95% of my customers are the household brands that you would know and operate on a global basis, where this complexity is actually worse overseas in places like Mexico and Brazil than it is, and we have to offer them service on a global basis. About $1.4 trillion in cargo values on our platform at any one time.
Wow.
And our job is to actually secure that supply chain. So the integrity of that supply chain as it relates if you're a large global electronics manufacturer, now you're relying on all these different entities out there like freight forwarding networks, broker networks. If it's international and you're dealing with kind of cargo, you might be dealing with vessels or air freight providers. So it's a very, very complex world you're managing. Our job is to provide an umbrella of integrity around that movement. Where freight slows down or is exchanged, these are risk points where typically that's where the problem occurs. Our job is to kind of manage the integrity of that operation, or to make sure the right people are involved, particularly if you think about fictitious pickups, making sure that the person actually you're handing the freight to is the legitimate party. And then having an ability to kind of watch the freight it's an AI monitoring service that we provide where people are aware of compliance. So you're a shipper, you expect this global freight forwarder or this air freight provider to you probably have a signed contract with them, but they're using 50 different vendors underneath that who don't have a signed contract, but you're still relying on compliance happening at that level. Our job, because we know what compliance looks like, it's already coded into our platform. When non-compliance occurs at whatever level, we get a push notification that there's a problem. And if that problem is left unaddressed, it's going to lead to an actual loss. So our job is to actually push that knowledge point to the offender, issue them the instruction of how to get back into compliance. And then once you're in compliance, your chance of actually suffering a loss, once everything's been done right, is minuscule. So that's why we're so successful. Our loss ratio, if you look at the insurance lens around that 1.4 trillion, is less than 7%.
Oh, wow.
So effectively it's like zero. And so our mousetrap really works. It really works well because we develop collaboration amongst the different parties. In most cases, non-compliance is unwitting. They don't know they're supposed to do it this way. They don't know they're not allowed to stop there. The direction of travel is going that way for a purpose, but it looks like it's going the wrong way for us. So all of that kind of like communication and getting collaboration going into supply chain is what we're really good at. And when all that happens and happens correctly, it leads to a faster supply chain and a more resilient and secure supply chain.
So it sounds like it's a very heavier lift on the preventative side of things and helping all of the key players.
So we get a lot of credit. You see, you talk about our YouTube channel and LinkedIn and all that, about people talk about our recoveries. They all look really sexy and all that. James Bond stuff, and a lot of it is. We consider recoveries failures because it should never have gone missing in the first place. So for every one recovery or theft that occurs in our network, under our protection, it's almost always because people didn't follow our prompts. And that's a way of judging the collaboration of that vendor, and shippers use that as a way of kind of measuring the quality of that vendor. And a lot of vendors are let go because of non-conformance or non-compliance. But for every one event that occurs like that where they don't listen, that's the exception. There are thousands that don't get hit or touched at all because we're making sure they swim through the shark-infested water safely, right? And that's what we're doing all day. So I get a chuckle out of it because I get pinged all the time by some competitors going, "Oh, I love your recovery stuff. That's like, wow, that's magnificent marketing." And I go, "Guys, failure." And they go, "Are you crazy?" And I get a bit of a kick out of it because we are very good at recovering because we know people will not always do what we tell them to do. But when they don't, we have to clean up well. And that's part of our law enforcement network and making sure they're enabled to be successful. And that's law enforcement. When we pick up the phone, we call them, or they're using our technology and they see an event happening that is positive, they're really happy because they know it's us and they can trust the data.
Oh, so law enforcement is actually using the software too?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah, we're actually moving that to a next level where we'll be doing a formal alliance with and supporting Interpol. So every law enforcement agency in the world will be inside the platform.
And then what happens you mentioned the recovery aspect. I would imagine that the recovery aspect and maybe even the prevention aspect is different from country to country.
Yes.
How do you navigate those complexities?
I always tell people, recovery in northern Texas, we're based in Austin, Texas, right? So a recovery in North Texas is, talk about one that's more complex, like how about a recovery in Kosovo? Language.
Right.
Knowledge, who is, all of these other factors that play in when you're dealing internationally. But our procedures, our capabilities have to work as well there as they do in North Texas. And that's one thing we pride ourselves on, is our global capability for immediate response and law enforcement engagement. It's critical because police all over the world, it's a real knowledge gap. They don't really understand what this crime is, what it means. How are they involved, or how can they actually be successful? Our job is to educate. That's part of what we'll be doing with Interpol, is really a big education campaign to actually teach people about this problem. Because COVID really showed a lot of entities like these big jurisdictional kind of government bodies that supply chain is strategic, where before it was ignored. COVID changed all. Now people realize that, hang on, it matters if we can't get our stuff onto the shelves. people get upset. And once the people are upset, that's when people start getting, politicians start getting fired. So they're involved now as well. So, COVID really changed the whole dynamic in a positive way, also a negative way. Negative because it just opened this world of kind of free activity for criminals. Positive in the way that it actually kind of rooted people's attention to, a real existential threat that can matter to a family if you can't get baby formula. I know we all joke about toilet roll during COVID. Remember that? But that was a problem. It was a real problem, and people were not happy. But then you look at infant formula and stuff like that, or you look at medications that people really need are life-saving. It can really hurt, and taking it seriously and being preventative in thinking. That's one of the reasons why we've developed this law enforcement network globally, is that it can actually matter in helping people be successful in recovering something and using that as a learning event to make sure it doesn't happen the next time. And that's when we get them into the preventative mindset. And then what really works for us is they get to know us. And when we send an information packet to them, they'll immediately accept it as valid. It's a trusted source. And we can move faster then, because I can't tell you how many times in the early days we were calling like the French gendarmerie and they go, "Who are you? I don't even know you. I'm not responding to you. And how do I know this is legit?" And that's a real problem, because we're giving them vital information that is very timely. Within 5-10 minutes is no longer valuable because, the stuff is gone and you'll never see it again. So getting that kind of environment where they actually trusted you is a huge thing. We have a lot of ex-law enforcement on staff that deal with these networks around the world and help them understand how to engage directly with our technology. So,
well, as you're, I guess, on an educational campaign where you are trying to, tell these, different law enforcement officers and then different customers on how to prevent it, so that education gets out there, and then also freight tech has just exploded in recent years. So as, the education and the technology stacks continue to advance, the criminal technology stack continues to advance as well.
That's where they're really making gains. The criminals are infiltrating the technology faster than it's being developed. It's unbelievable, especially things like a BOL. One of the biggest, if you want to call it, tech breakthroughs was the EBOLs, right? What people didn't realize, that was a golden opportunity for the criminal networks to go in and change them after they've received the load. I know of one event that happened over a period of 2 months where a criminal organization had infiltrated a semi-legitimate company, let me call it that, because it was definitely criminal elements involved. And they were actually charging this very well-known high street electronics distributor that we all know and we all use and trust. They were using that supply chain that they hit something like 64 different full truckload shipments over a 2-month period. And they didn't take the full load, but they take half of it, change the BOL to reflect, I'm delivering 7 pallets, I should have delivered 14, and will continuously do that till they were actually triggered. And what triggered it was that company's kind of cycle count, it was time to kind of do some checks, and checks and balances were not adding up. It turned out that that was probably well over a dozen full truckloads that were, and
so
nobody knew about it.
Skimming off the top.
Nobody knew about it. And it was going on and on. It looked legit. We delivered on time. And they were paying these people. They were paying them invoices. And they were stealing. And then when that was discovered, they just disappeared. That BOL or that DOT number became obsolete. And they just go and they buy 2 more. And they're out doing it again the next day.
Well, that was another thing that I learned from watching a couple of YouTube videos from your Overhaul channel, is that when the rate of the crime has increased time-wise so drastically, where it's not just they're going to hit you once or twice, they're going to hit you hard and fast, and that's a recent trend.
Yeah, which is one of the things that we're talking about a lot in our track over there in the panels we're running, is that change is inevitable. You cannot operate the way you operated before. And in supply chain, as well as I do, people hate change. They resist it. Getting them to adopt new procedures is the hardest part. But the shipper community now is starting to speak. And we represent them. I'm not saying I represent these companies, but collectively from an industry standpoint, we have a lot of these companies that are coming to us and saying, look, I'm just not accepting it anymore. You're handing my freight to a criminal. And a change needs to be adopted, and that change means things might slow down or get a little bit more difficult. I'm telling you right now, you're doing it. And the shippers are starting to change people's attitudes because they're the big stick, right?
Right, they're the ones paying.
And they're just not accepting this kind of ridiculous scenario where you are seeing people not even, like I saw some of the horror stories I've seen of not even like somebody giving a Costco membership card as ID, or some kind of and like being accepted, and they're handing these people like a full truckload. It's ridiculous because it's speed. Get things moving. Don't slow them down. Don't slow them down. A lot of the change that we manage on a day-to-day basis is getting that process changed where it doesn't slow it down in a meaningful way. I always tell people is like, it's not a needle in a haystack problem. You want to find a haystack first. That's our job. Slow down on this one. Check that one out because that's wrong. That's not who booked it online, and that's not who showed up to pick it up. And giving people those insights now, we're saying to them, okay, it's only 1 in 100 you have to check. Slow down on the ones that look anomalous, and they're the ones you really focus on. And then getting people to actually adopt these procedures and do that, because there is change necessary. You have to have a new way of actually verifying what's on the ASN is what showed up on the dock, the correct paperwork, and it's not just, a one identifier that can be mimicked and taken from a load board. It has to be something where this is the individual who is supposed to be picking up this load. I'm handing that out, and then there's the whole other continuum about how do I protect that load when it's moving for 3,000 or 4,000 miles, and these guys want it. And they know what to do because they know what truck drivers do, legitimate ones. They stop in the first 50 miles, always. They get their logbooks and everything else in order, they get their meal, maybe some rest. Then they go off and you've given them enough time where they have that luxury. What happens as soon as they stop? The criminals who have been following them, we deal with dozens of attempts like that every day, where they're literally stepping into a vehicle that's open, no truck driver ever locks his vehicle, and they never turn it off. So the criminals walk in with a vehicle that is like...
They're so simple.
Yeah, literally it's taking candy off a child, basically.
Do you find that with the fraud that's being perpetuated, is it different country to country?
Yes.
How so? Give us some examples.
I'd say the most sophisticated we're dealing with at the moment would definitely be North America, with freight fraud practices. That's now being exported. Some of the criminal organizations are multinational, and they never spot it or leave behind a good idea that might work somewhere else. So we're seeing freight fraud identical to what we're seeing in North America happening in the UK now, and Northern Europe. And it's only a matter of time before it goes everywhere. Now, in places like Mexico or Brazil, it's more blunt. They bring a gun to the game. It's hijack, not theft. And hijack means they choose where to take it. The gorilla with the gun, right? So that's a whole different dynamic. Like you need to have multiple layers of security. You might even have escorts, physical escorts, shepherding that load. But in most cases, it's like North America, we have some, maybe a shipper or a freight forwarder who'll quib and complain about one device that we're going to place inside the cargo that's going to be hidden. It'll allow us to recover it if it's stolen. They give out about that. In places like Mexico, you're putting like 24 devices in, and nobody questions it. It's like, it's everywhere. Like you have to take in-transit risk seriously in places like Mexico, Brazil, Eastern Europe, other places like South Africa. We operate in all these areas. So it's easier for us to kind of, I suppose, engage a customer there because everybody accepts it. But in North America, it's kind of like, because it's a silent crime, people are kind of like, really, I have to do all this? Like, and where's the budget coming from? And that's why in most cases the shippers fund the budget. But it's, everywhere is different. The nuances are important, and understanding and studying. That's why we have such an active intelligence branch. Their job is to study what's happening, what's different about it here, and then educate the industry so the industry knows what to expect.
Barry, how did you get started? What gave you the light bulb moment of starting Overhaul?
Well, my first career was the military. So I was a tier 1 operator for about 12 years in Irish Defence Forces. I left, started a company. Customers were saying, look, my freight's been stolen, what can I do about it? So I put together a business plan that led to my first startup. I took that to America 25 years ago, nearly 26 now, 2000. I sold that company to a Fortune 50 in about 2012. I couldn't stand corporate culture, lasted 2 years, got a year off for good behavior, and I started Overhaul 10 years ago next month.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, the intelligence that you guys give out, it's so fascinating to learn. Every conversation that I have with Overhaul or every video I watch, I learn something new. And I imagine that that's the culture within the company, is that you always have to stay on top of your toes and learn.
And that's informing our strategy of growth now. So, our M&A, we just recently acquired Freight Verify. That was a very, very interesting kind of technology stack that operates primarily in the automotive industry. And we had no presence there at all. And that's kind of, we call it mass market visibility tool. That's really exciting for us. So, we acquired that company late summer last year, and that's been a wonderful experience. And they're based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, so I get to go out and visit my colleagues in Ann Arbor now pretty frequently, which is great. But no, look, I call it, a lot of investors are talking to me at the moment, are saying, look, what's going on? There's so much happening in supply chain integrity. And I says, look, there's been a shift to risk. Risk is important, and it's becoming more important. And the reason for that is shippers, while they are concerned about the dollar value of a product being stolen or damaged, the biggest problem they have is they can't replace it. And when you can't replace a thing, you're talking market share now, because your competitor will. And like if you're talking about a cell phone that you can only get the competitor's kind of handset, like there's actually data on this about how long somebody stays with that phone provider. It could be the generation. So you've lost that punter.
Wow.
So now that's why it's at the boardroom level, like why risk is important to a shipper. It's like, no guys, we cannot be found to be want, and we can't supply our customers with the tools they're looking for. And if they don't get it from us, they'll get it from the competitor. And then they're gone. So market share is now a thing, it's not the dollar value.
So it just sounds like it's a constant game of like the chicken or the egg. Like you just gotta.
We call it the arms race with the criminal.
Oh, great! Yeah.
We study them, like we know them intimately, and we respect them. They're bad and they're terrible, but they're really good at what they do. And if you can study some of these bad guys, they could teach a class in supply chain. That's how good they are, right? And now with that level of sophistication, infiltrating electronic systems for your good, or for your bad, their good. It's at a whole new level that you have to really understand. And we're launching at this show the first immutable BOL. So customers now can actually rely on the BOL they're using and it not be compromised by criminals, because it can't be. And that's what I mean by the arms race. We're constantly looking at what they're doing that's new, and what's working, and then developing strategies against that. And we're not waiting to be reactive to them. We're trying to push it even further. But then they react to us. I have a video of a criminal organization in California when we launched a new electronic seal that spoke to a device that's inside the load, and you would know when somebody accesses the load. So that's our way of getting law enforcement there quickly. And you have a confirmed breach. They spent 5 hours. It was like a workshop. 5 hours under video by the LAPD, where they were literally trying to take everything apart to see how they will defeat this new piece of tech that's just been entered into the dynamic. So literally, like, that's what these guys do all day. They figure out ways of breaching your current procedures. But the sad thing is, in most cases, most kind of distributors or shippers or freight forwarders just make it too easy for them. They're not even, like most of our customers, like we have a very high retention rate of customers, like well above 100%. And they're with us because we've really built up a very impressive, hardened supply chain. So they're not successful with them, but there's so many other ones that are not, reinforced, and they're just easy pickings. It's low-hanging fruit.
I could ask so many more questions, but we only have time for a couple of more. So I am curious, because it sounds like, supply chain has taken a seat at the boardroom table, but it also sounds like the risk portion of it is taking up the greater amount of the conversation. I'm curious is there even a possibility to kind of see what the future looks like when it comes to preventing cargo crime?
It's not going away. In fact, and that was one of our talk tracks in our event. it's going to escalate. It's going to require a combined collaborative approach. And that collaboration is not just the shipper, it's the freight forwarder, it's vendors, most importantly, it's law enforcement. And bringing all that together in a way that our information sharing is at a much higher level and is actually, providing value, particularly for response kind of capabilities. That really has to change because we do a lot of this, but it's no way near at the level it needs to be to get law enforcement there quickly, and they know they will. We know they will respond when we call, and that's legislation too. Now, in most cases, particularly in North America, the laws are already on the books, but the prosecutors are not enacting them because it's property crime, and that has to change. And what we're seeing now, which is the really positive thing, is the lobbyists from the shipper side of things are now saying to these, state entities in most cases. There are federal, but the state ones are really important because, if you're operating and you're in Texas or in Tennessee, you're going to say, hey, I'm losing here. I need your help. If you're not going to help me, I'm going somewhere else. And that's really affected California. A lot of companies have moved out of California and they're coming to Texas because they're getting that kind of level of cooperation. And that's pocketbook stuff, it's getting people's attention. But I do think there has to be a greater level of collaboration and understand that this is a crime that's not silent. It really matters. It has huge impact on our daily lives, and people's lives are at risk now. If you're talking about pharmaceuticals and stuff like that. So that collaboration approach has to happen, and has to happen at a faster rate than it is today. And because we think it's bad now, no criminal organization is going to turn away from this. It's just too profitable. And there's zero risk for them at the moment. So why would they not get involved? You rob a bank in Texas, there's cash limits on the drawer, there's die packs inside the cash you get. You might get 10 grand, maybe, if you're lucky. And everyone standing around you in the line is armed with a gun, so they might shoot you. And when you go outside the door, the cop's going to shoot you anyway because they've got the silent alarm. For 10 grand, you can rob $1 million worth of electronics and nobody's going to bat an eyelid.
So it's moved from robbing banks to robbing trucks.
Why would you rob a bank?
Yeah.
It's insane, and that's the risk ratio that criminals rely upon. I'm not going to put my life at risk, but I'm going to go over here. And a little bit of thought, a little bit of energy, I can get $1 million, and I can actually sell it back into the supply chain within the next 24 hours at a profit.
Well, this was a fascinating conversation. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of education that goes on in this space that continues to go on, and you guys are doing a fantastic job of letting people know of what the landscape looks like and how you can be proactive and then also use a company like Overhaul to be reactive. But even though you consider that a failure if you're reactive. Yeah. Well, Barry, thank
Prevention.
you so much.